Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's South West Plans panel. I'll go to the clerk. Can I confirm that all members are present?
Yes, we're just waiting on Sam Firth, but he's stuck in traffic at the moment, but he will be joining us.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the South and West Plans panel. My name is Councillor Paul Ray, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed onto the Leeds City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without the need to be present. South and West Plans panel deals with applications from south, north, west and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. Can I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute your microphone once you've introduced yourself? I will start from my left.
Afternoon, my name's Adam Ward. I'm the team leader for South West team and I'll be presenting the two planning applications on the agenda this afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Hunaidi. I'm a senior highways officer.
Good afternoon. My name is Helen Tipping and I'm the planning landscape architect.
Good afternoon. Stephen Varley, design officer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mahaley Franzmere for Moortown and Meanwood.
Good afternoon, Andy Parnham, Councillor for Armley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Raymond Jones for Horsforth.
Good afternoon and happy Yorkshire Day, everyone. Councillor Kaylee Brooks and I'm substituting for Zara Hussain today.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Andy Rowntree from Kirkstall Ward.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daniel Illingworth and part of the Plans panel team.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Warfield Ward.
Hey everyone, I'm Natasha Pross from the Clerks of the panel.
Afternoon, everyone. Nikki Dio, legal advisor for today's Plans panel.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West and Lead Office at South and West Plans panel.
Thank you very much, everyone. Moving to the agenda, could I ask the clerk to go through agenda item 1 to 5, please?
Thanks, Chair. Agenda item 1, there's no appeals. Agenda item 2, no exempt items. Agenda item 3, no formal late items. Agenda item 4, declarations from members. Take that as none. Apologies from Councillors Hussain and Stables. Councillor Brooks is here to sub for Councillor Hussain. And over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item number 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on the Thursday, the 6th of June 2024. Do members accept these minutes to be a true and correct record? I will take silence first of all as that. Yeah. And are there any matters arising from those? I'll take silence as a no. Any matters arising? No. Okay, moving on to item number 7 then. The application at number 9, Woodhall Park Crescent East, Pudsey, LS 28 7HG. Could I ask the officers to present the application?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, there's a glaring error on the front page. Actually, the date of the report is dated the 4th of July. It should actually be today, 1st of August, of course. The 4th of July report was done, I think, in advance, and when that panel was postponed because of the general election. In terms of the introduction, the application is the change of use of a dwelling house to a small children's home that changes its use from Class C3 to Class C2, and it's brought to the Plans panel at the request of a ward member for the reasons set out in the report. It's a 3-bed, semi-detached house set within an established residential area. It's close to Bradford Road, so that you can see the site plan in front of you there that's indicated. Bradford Road, the main thoroughfare, the A647 running between Bradford and Leeds. And the site has access to a number of bus services, as well as nearby schools, a post office and general store. The proposal is the conversion of the existing 3-bedroom semi-detached house into a small children's home. It would be for occupation by one child only, who would be under the age of 18 years, and it would be supported by 3 staff, 2 of which would be on a 24-hour rota system. Internally, the site would be laid out as a living room, a kitchen diner and a conservatory on the ground floor, and upstairs there would be a bedroom for the child, as well as a bedroom for one member of staff, a staff office and a bathroom. There are no external alterations proposed to the dwelling house, and there's a private garden to the rear and a driveway to the front with parking. Just running through the slides in question, this is the rendered semi-detached house within the established residential area, and a few internal photographs showing the downstairs and the upstairs accommodation. That's just looking, left-hand photo is looking at the, well, both photos are looking at the front of the property there with the entrance door and the two-storey bay feature to the right. Internally, stairs up to the first floor level where it's currently laid out as for 3 bedrooms. That's a site plan showing the location of the site and the extent of parking towards the front, a garage to the side and a rear garden towards the back of the house. This is the internal layout and configuration of the proposed use. Yeah, the slide in front of you shows the proposed layout plan there with the ground floor accommodation and the bedrooms upstairs. So you can see bedroom for the under 18-year-old child is at the back of the unit here. The staff bedroom is at the front of the house together with a staff office and a bathroom at first floor level as well. In terms of the issues for consideration by members, the principle of a change of use is considered to be acceptable. It's in a sustainable location and its use is very similar to that of a C3 dwelling house. In terms of the amenity, there would be no adverse impacts on existing residents. And there's no concernable difference in terms of the impact and noise and disturbance compared to occupation by a family in this particular property. Whilst there would be still some staff movements and healthcare visitations that might take place, these would not be significant enough as to cause any significant impact on the amenities of adjoining occupants. Parking exists to the front of the property to cater for the needs of the proposed use. However, I would recommend adding a planning condition to ensure that the frontage is hard surfaced, because at the moment it's laid out to grass. So that just needs to be added as a planning condition. A condition would also be added requiring 1 electric vehicle charging point as well as the details of bin stores. The use would also be conditioned to restrict occupation to 1 child only and the number of staff to 3 at any one point in time. It's therefore recommended for approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As there are no registered objectors in attendance, we'll actually move straight to questions for the officers. So do any members have any questions for the officers? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. Is that 3 staff on site or on rotation?
Yeah, I mean, it's on rotation, but we have a restriction to say that 3 would be the upper limit of on site at any one point in time. I think the company has a number of additional staff, but we're saying for this particular property, we'd have a condition to say actually 3 is the limit, and you wouldn't want any more anyway for 1 child, and that's what the site can accommodate in terms of its usage. So we'd say 3 at any one point in time, or no more than 3.
Any follow-up, councillor?
No, thank you.
Any other questions, councillor Anderson?
One from the 3 staff. If there are only 2 car parking spaces being allocated and you have 3, and if you do need any specialist staff for whatever reason, because even people in their own house occasionally need specialists to come in, where would you, well, this is a corner site. So if people were to park outside the property on the corner, that would lead to a highways potential problem. It might be safe to park. It might be safe to park on the pavement. I'm not, it just, but parking on the corner is dangerous. Is there anything we can do about that? That's number 1. Now, this is probably more of a strategic question. We seem to be getting more and more of these types of applications. Are we considering trying to get a policy set up about over intensification if it was to occur? So that's just something to think about, because it's when you look at the previous history, there are more and more coming forward. And the final thing is on the a recreational or space to play, is there any special circumstances that need to be thought about for that, or is it treated as just a child in a house? If you see what I mean, there's no need to treat it any differently. Thank you.
Yes, I'll let the highways officer answer the question on parking, but in terms of setting up a policy for road intensification, it's not something I'm aware of that our policy team are looking at the moment, but I mean, I'm aware of the fact that we have had more of these types of applications before us, I think, because of the pressing need to accommodate these children in homes. So there's nothing, as far as I'm aware, that's on the agenda for policy making. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just for completeness and for Councillor Anderson, the question was actually raised when we had a previous one of these that came to Plans Panel. It was taken away, and the policy section are aware of that request. As Adam says, at the moment, we don't have a policy. Now, if either got with it, I couldn't add, but they are aware of it.
Yeah, with regard to play space, we are just treating it as though it is a child that requires an area to play in a garden, such that you would consider play space for any other family or children. So we wouldn't treat that in any different way for this particular application. It's got a private garden to the rear. It's one child. That's sufficient to cater for the needs of the applicant.
Again, I've never been around the back. I've been at the front of the house, but I've never been at the back of the house. What size of garden is there? Well, just in terms of comparison to standard properties that you'd expect the average young person to play in, because you get some gardens that have been made hard standing, for example. You've got some that have got extensions at the back.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, just so we don't go too far off beam here. Obviously, establishments of this nature are regulated by Ofsted, so it's not really a planning issue. It's currently a family home. It'll be occupied in a similar way as a family. We don't know the needs of any particular child. They will vary, so it's not really a question for this plans panel. The square meterage of the back garden, to be fair.
Looking at the existing lawful position, it could be the case that this house could be occupied by at least 3 children if they shared a bedroom and another one had another bedroom. So, you certainly will have less children potentially living in this property than you could by a single family house. Do you want to answer the highways question out?
Yeah, in relation to highways, it's just what Steve alluded to. The previous or the permitted use of the site as a 3-bed dwelling would have generated a similar parking demand, what the proposed use, so 2 parking spaces. In terms of visitor parking, you could say that visitors could park on street. There's no restriction currently to park on street. But looking at the map, there is space to park on street without blocking people's driveways in front of the property. And staff, the staff that will be on site, they could work around that, whether to park on the driveway or park on street. But we're anticipating, in accordance with our parking standards, that the parking demand for the proposed use would not be higher than the previous use or the permitted use as a dwelling, as a 3-bed dwelling.
Tells me, because I've got one, well, it's actually not in my ward, it's actually in Wheatwood ward, which is across the road, that there is a lot of vehicles associated with it, and often you get other council departments needing to visit, and other statutory organisations needing to visit, depending on noise levels, what's been happening with the individual concerned as well. So it's been a purely a corner site. If this had been in the middle of a road, middle of a street, fine, I can see the point. No, so it's just what's concerning me is the corner site. You didn't make any reference to the fact that if people are parking on a corner, I accept what you say about parking on the street, which I have no problems with, but it's the corner that I'm concerned about.
So the carriageway is about 5.5 meters wide, give or take. So you could park on the highway without obstructing the free flow of traffic on that corner in particular. So there isn't really a highway safety concern for on-street parking to happen in this corner. this location. The road is wide enough to accommodate on-street parking without causing a highway safety issue.
Park. The highway code is very clear. You should not park at a junction within, I think it's 10 meters. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. It's, you know, in a normal street, fine, middle of a street, fine, but it's on a corner where at a junction where people shouldn't be parking, and there might be occasions when more than one vehicle would need to be parked there or thereabouts. That's what's concerning me.
So the nearest junction is about 20 meters away from the driveway, so it's not within parking. Yeah, but the junction in terms of the opening is 20 meters away, so so there won't be any parking that would obstruct another junction or an opposite junction. What I would say is it wouldn't be different to a visitor visiting a dwelling of a family house. So you could still have visitors if this was occupied by a family who would park on street. So it comes back to the argument that it won't make a huge difference.
I think the point that's being made here, Chair, is that it's a residential street. There are no restrictions within that street. Car parking can currently take place, and there is sufficient space, even with the access into the property, to allow a third vehicle to be parked on street without any obstructions. And I think the reference to the highway code, and it is an awful long time since I read the highway code, I have to admit, the reference to junctions, particularly concerned about the cul-de-sac, I'm just looking at the plan dead opposite, refers to people parking within the visibility display from exiting that junction. I think that's what that refers to. But again, there's no issue in terms of restrictions on that street, so it's no different to a situation that could occur now if it was occupied by a family.
Any other questions before we move on to comments? Comments then, please. Any comments? Okay, so bearing in mind no comments, can I ask someone to, if they're willing, oh, sorry, actually, can you just sum up for me quickly, first of all, Steve, and then we'll go to first and second.
As it stands at the moment, the recommendation is to grant permission subject to the following conditions which are outlined in the report before you, and it just requires somebody to move the motion and second, if that's the case.
Councillor Brooks to propose, and Councillor, who wants to go first? Go on, Andy. They got slightly quicker for seconds. Fight to propose in second. So, can I ask all those in favour, please show your hands. All those against? Abstentions? Yeah, not okay.
Sorry, councillors are intending to abstain. Could they just actually advise that is how they want the votes recorded? No vote at all?
Fair enough then. So I believe that's the officer recommendation has passed. So moving on to item number 8, former Huff side high school, Hufftop, Swindon, I've never pronounced that properly, Leeds LS13. Could I ask the officer to present the application, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. This is an application for 100% affordable housing on an allocated housing site. It was deferred at the last meeting on the 6th of June for the reasons set out in paragraph 2 of this current report. In summary, this was because members considered that the report didn't consider the design in the round and that the landscape and tree planting proposals were unconvincing, and particularly the western boundary treatment needed more work. Members also requested that a design and tree and landscape officers be in attendance when the item is returned back to Plans Panel to answer any questions. So therefore, we have the benefit of both Stephen Varley, who's the Principal Design Officer, and also Helen Tippin, who is the Planning and Landscape Architect on behalf of the Council. I'm not going to do a full presentation because members had the benefit of that last time round, but in terms of its location, that's on the red line plan before us here. In terms of the the house types and the site layout. The plans were provided before, but I'll just quickly run through those. That's the site in question there, which was previously occupied by the school. This is the proposed site layout, which effectively hasn't changed since members last saw it. Neither of the house types either, which we showed the panel last time, and that was the apartment block. We have had some updates to the landscaping plans, the boundary treatment, etc., which have been uploaded onto the system as well. And also some alterations to the western boundary. So looking at the individual concerns and issues that members had issues with, in terms of the design, as I said, no actual amendments have taken place to the layout or the house types. However, we've had a discussion with the applicant over the use of materials. I think members were concerned about the use of brickwork predominantly taking place across the site. I think, as advised at the previous plans meeting, site context has got a variety in terms of external materials. Yes, there are stone properties opposite the site on Hooftop, but equally on the opposite side of the site towards Harley Drive, there are a lot of brick properties and also brick flats, 3 stories, brick and render flats to the east of the site. So the site has got a mixed context in terms of materials. So with that in mind, the applicant looked at potential brick options and provided some information on potential, not actual, but potential bricks that could be used in the development. And these are shown for members' information today at this plans panel. A clear brick rather than a concrete brick, so something that's a bit more traditional and historic in keeping with the area. We also looked at screening along the boundary as well. So at the moment, the site is screened by mature planting and trees, and to some extent, filtered views will be available and will help screen the development from areas along Hooftop as well. In terms of trees and landscaping, further information and updated plans have been provided by the applicant. Let's go back to the slide. And the applicant has been looking at issues to address the concerns of the panel, but also of the landscape officer as well, who had some concerns previously. And the information is related to updated information on levels, on sections, updates to the arboricultural impact assessment, and also on the landscape specification and design. Officers have also reviewed the extent of tree loss on site, given receipt of a number of objections, which have queried and to say that the extent of tree loss was underestimated. And they've said that because this is due to the growth of saplings into trees over a period of time, and the fact that they've reached a stem diameter or a diameter of over 150 millimeters. But the resident makes reference to the circumference instead of the diameter. So that's a factual error from the resident's point of view. I think the fact remains is that the officers are confident that the number of trees to be removed as a result of the development is 29, and that's set out in the previous plans panel report. So trees lost is 29, and in mitigation, it's a 3-for-1 policy. So therefore, 87 trees would be required. Of that, we've got 64 that are proposed to be on site, not counting back gardens, and 23 of those would be off site, which would be secured through a planning condition. The important thing to note here is that all of the mature trees along the site frontage onto Hooftop have been returned, save for some to facilitate the site access. And the majority of the trees in the corners and the edges have also been returned as well. And there's also scope for that new planting on site. Members might be aware that it's not unusual for most residential schemes to result in some element of tree loss. But the most important thing is that the category A trees along the frontage are replaced, and we have sufficient tree replacement planting to comply with policy. Members also raised concerns about the planting along the western edge of the site, which lies adjacent to the existing playing pitches. Remember, Sport England had a requirement to mitigate the impact of the existing playing pitch by requiring a ball strike assessment and some kind of ball mitigation scheme to be submitted. So that was at the request of Sport England, which the applicant has done, and amended plans have been provided showing fencing and netting up to a height of 8 meters above pitch level, owing to the slope that it's on. the fencing would be towards the bottom end of the slope, nearer to the housing site. And the fencing would be therefore 8 metres above pitch level, which is a requirement of Sport England. The applicant proposes further planting as well behind the ball stop netting. Members had a concern visually of how that might look, and they were looking to, I suppose, ask the question about whether any planting could be introduced. So the applicant has proposed some fastigiate planting, which is a type of planting that grows more vertically than outwards. And if members have got any specific queries on that, I would urge you to ask the landscape officer. So the landscaping would not only help mitigate the visual impact of the development from the open space as well, but they would also help mitigate the impact of the netting as well. The applicant has also agreed to remove the rather unsightly metal palisade fence as well, which currently sits on site. It did seem odd that we had 3 forms of boundary treatment, so it was only logical to try and remove that unsightly form of boundary treatment. As a consequence of proposing the hedging and the tree planting a lot on the western edge, the BNG is actually improved over and above what it was first time around, so that's seen as a positive measure. In terms of the impact on birds and bats, because of the design and thickness of the fencing and netting, coupled with the planting, this will ensure that the boundary treatment is detected by birds and bats so as to avoid any adverse impact. Sport England were happy with the ball strike assessment. They were happy with the location and the height of the fencing and netting. But they maintained their objection because there was a lack of a maintenance agreement. Following that, the applicant did agree to maintain the fencing, but only for a period of 10 years. And that resulted in Sport England maintaining their objection, saying that actually it needed to be in perpetuity. The applicant has since amended that and agreed that the fencing will be maintained in perpetuity, and we've sent that back to Sport England, and we're currently waiting their comments and hopefully the removal of their objection. However, for the purposes of this meeting, their objection still stands until such a time that they've considered that information. So I think at this stage, I think the panel are advised to change the recommendation. So it's rather than to approve the application, the recommendation would be now to defer and delegate to the Chief Planning Officer, subject to the receipt of no objections from Sport England. I think that's all the issues that members were concerned about last time. We've talked about the design, we've talked about the landscape impact, we've talked about the western boundary. In addition to that, since the publication of the panel report, we've had a number of additional representations from residents, some of which have come very late in the day, even as late as yesterday evening. 8 further representations have been submitted, 6 from 3 properties, 1 from a planning consultant who has reviewed the panel report and continued to object on behalf of 37 residents, and another representation from a group representing 37 residents. The issues raised are broadly the same as the previously reported the plans panel, but in summary, these relate to lack of meaningful public consultation, inappropriate external materials, inappropriate fencing, the impact on ecology, drainage plans insufficient, loss of mature trees, parking and access issues, applicant not made the requests to the changes since the 6th of June, discrimination against existing residents by the council determining an application of its own, late submission of information, concerns over ball strike netting. There is an ongoing police investigation relating to the football parking problems, impact on emergency services, lack of a panel site visit, concerns over the consultation process, impact from noise from the playing pitches on new residents, issues associated with financial viability, loss of privacy and amenity for neighbouring properties. Quotes are also provided from recordings of panel members on the 2 previous panel meetings as well. And also visual illustrations have also been provided to help make a number of points about design, materials, parking and boundary treatment. Reference is also made to a number of errors contained with the previous panel report. However, these are more points of contention or typos. Speaking of which, in terms of a typo, there is a typo in the report which relates to Councillor Smith's comments the first line should read 100%, not 10%, and the 0 has been missed off. All of these representations and documents submitted by local residents have been reviewed, and we do not consider that they raise any new material considerations or issues which members are not aware of or included in the reports provided. It's just also worth briefly mentioning to panel members that the government has recently issued a revised version of the MPPF and also a ministerial statement. However, this current version of the MPPF is the subject of public consultation, and it doesn't end until the end of September, well, 24th of September. So that carries a very limited weight at the moment. So, in summary, officers consider the applicant has addressed members' previous concerns and that consideration has been given to residents' views. The scheme will deliver 100% affordable housing, which is something that is required across the council and something that it's in high demand of. Officers consider this scheme to be in a sustainable form of development on a brownfield piece of land, which is allocated for housing in the development plan. The development is policy compliant and recommended for approval. And this is subject to no receipt of no objections from Sport England, insofar as the recommendation will be altered to defer and delegate to the Chief Planning Officer. Final reminder that we have the design and landscape officers here to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. There are no speaking permitted on this application. In that case, I move to questions to the officers. Questions to the officers. I will go first of all for Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask the landscape officer if we could have a crash course on fastigiate planting, please, just to understand a bit. I mean, I guess it's a type of plant or possibly a family of plants rather than a particular species, but just to understand a bit about how high it's likely to grow, how fast it's likely to grow, that kind of stuff. If you can give us a bit of a briefing on that area. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that question. Fastigiate trees are basically naturally columnar. They grow to a specific width. Yeah, sorry. They're naturally columnar, so they don't extend beyond the stipulations in the RHS, which I often refer to. The ones selected are one of the narrowest you can get, because at the moment, until we know the Sport England detail, because we're still kind of waiting on what exactly they require, we've chosen the narrowest trees. I've suggested the narrowest trees possible. I've also suggested a very narrow fastigiated hedge, which is a Ilex crenata, which grows again naturally, doesn't extend too far. Now it all depends on final Sport England detail, but the proposals are to plant them probably at a wider spacing, so we let light into the gardens, but they still provide a visual amenity kind of softening to the boundary. And with the hedge, that will help screen the fencing as well. So we're hoping that will soften the boundary, sorry.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. So to what height will this planting grow, please?
You get ultimate heights given in the RHS. I think for this particular one, it was from memory, it was 12 to 15 or 16, but it depends on the ground conditions. And if the ground conditions are perfect, they will attain the maximum height. But in urban situations, you may get ground conditions which don't allow that, or natural environmental conditions. So it depends, basically. It would be very unlikely that they did achieve that height in that location, but they should provide the screening and the breaking up of from my point of view, from a landscape design point of view, it's about the softening of that boundary, nothing to do with the ball stop fence really. So
just for clarity, is that 12 to 15 foot or meters?
Meters.
Steve, you wanted to quickly say something, or is that?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add a result of a question that I was asked the other day. There are 10 of the, and I think Helen would have to remind me of the Latin name, but the 10 of the taller ones are planted along that boundary to break up visually the screening. Helen's mentioned in imperfect conditions, there could be as high as 15 to 20 metres, but in the location they are, as Helen said, they could be lower. They are slow growing. They're described as a slow growing tree that grows to around about 20 to 30 centimetres a year. So it would take some considerable time before they get to a maximum height anyway. And the rest of it, as Helen has said, is hedging between those trees. So there's only 10 proposed at the moment, but the conditions being applied for further details to be submitted.
Any follow-up, councillor?
No, thank you. That's fine. Thanks.
Councillor Brooks was next, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. So it's my understanding that a written ministerial statement is also capable of being a material planning consideration, as in the Carla Holmes case 2011. So would that not mean that we have to consider the delivery of affordable homes as outlined in that ministerial statement?
Yes, that's correct. We would have to take into account any consideration given into a written ministerial statement. I think the issue with the one that's just been released is it's fairly broad brush in terms of, obviously it sets out the government's general aims with regard to particular housing and affordable housing, which we will have to have regard to in any decision making. It doesn't specify that we have to approve all forms of affordable housing under any circumstances, but it certainly gives us a clear steer that that is the intent of the government towards promoting and supporting the provision of affordable housing in its priorities.
Any follow-up, councillor Brooks?
Thank you. Yeah. And then I'm just wondering about viability. Is viability a consideration for affordable housing applications in the same way as it is for commercial applications?
Yes, thanks, councillor. Yeah, viability in this particular instance it's not a material planning consideration which the applicant has advanced, so it's not something that's pertinent to the determination of this current application. We have, in certain circumstances, applicants submitting viability cases when they can't afford to provide the required level of affordable housing or green space, for example. But here we have a policy compliant scheme. It's not reliant on any viability issues whatsoever. It's been determined in accordance with the planning policies, and in that respect, it's considered to be policy compliant.
Any more questions, councillor Brooks?
No, thanks, but it's good to know that everything is policy compliant. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, this is my first meeting on this panel. But given, as has been written by those who have submitted those comments, and it was recovered again on the 6th of June, in 2 meetings, it has been made clear that stone should be an option considered. Can I ask as a result why it's not been included in the materials that have been proposed? And also, especially given the conservation of the similar area that is Huff Top, and also the entrance to the site is also stone. Can I also ask, when it comes to the trees that have been mentioned, 64 on site, will those trees be mature trees, or will they just simply be saplings, and therefore will actually they survive, or will they be gladly able to regenerate the area green?
Yes, thank you, councillor. Yeah, in terms of the materials, I think I outlined in the presentation both today and on the 6th of June that the area is mixed in terms of materiality, i.e. there is a mix of brick, there's render and the stone, which forms part of the local context, and that's what members should have regard to in their decision making. Now, clearly members did mention the issue of stone at previous panel meetings, and that was for the applicant to go back and consider. And in this instance, the proposal by the applicant is a development predominantly or entirely of brick. If I can just get the presentation back, please, I can just visually just emphasise a few things, if that's okay, Dan. The first or second slide would do, actually. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so in terms of materials, you're absolutely right, councillor. We have got a number of stone properties on Huff Top, particularly along this section here where you've got stone properties. Having said that, when you go further along this bottom end of Huff Top, there are some brick properties as well. These 3-storey blocks of flats here are a mix of brick and stone. And the housing towards the north off Harley Drive, that's predominantly or nearly all entirely brick. So you have to have regard to the local context. So whilst there are some stone properties on Hooftop, there is a mix in the locality. And for those reasons, we think that brick is a suitable material. In terms of trees, we would be specifying that those trees need to be extra heavy standard trees. And if the landscape officer wants to comment on that, I'd be happy to explain as well.
Could we just go to the slide that has the gateway entrance that's made of stone? Because there's a picture in.
Referring to the existing site entrance, which would be closed up as a result of the development. Yeah, I'll go to that one.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. So, yep.
Thank you. I think that from this point of view, if you look at Hooftop in terms of, yes, that's going to be, as you say, closed up, but regardless of that, it's concerning that members have raised at 2 meetings, this is a concern, and we've come to the 3rd meeting of which the applicant is this authority and still is not willing to justify the comments that have come forward from members of this panel. And I just wondered, as a result, is there a particular consideration that was there anything in particular where you could say what comments that the councillors made at those particular meetings were not relevant to what we've actually then been able to come out and see with those applications that have come forward?
I just need to, I think it's pertinent to remind colleagues here that when members make comments, it is for the applicant to decide whether or not they wish to take those comments on board. And we're here to make judgments, not on what ifs, but on what is presented. So I'm going to ask the officer to answer the question, but I want members to be really clear of that. We're not here to answer what ifs. We're here to make a determination on the application before us.
Yes, members can obviously comment on what whatever issues they want to, including materials, which is relevant in this particular case as well. In that respect, the applicant went back, reconsidered, and thought that brick was an appropriate material. Officers have agreed with that standpoint for the reasons specified. However, if members have an alternative view, you as a decision-making body are quite open to do that. But that's what the proposal is on the table. Officers' view is that that the materials are acceptable. So ultimately, it's up to panel to decide.
Follow, Councillor Firth? Any other questions? Councillor Parnham, completely forgot your name there.
Am I allowed to make a comment?
Councillor Anderson.
Wouldn't surprise, but got 1 or 2 points I want to try and just probe a little bit further on. The residents are very clear, as are local members, about drainage issues. I know from bitter experience that when we get told that things are satisfactory, it turns out that within weeks and months, it turns out not to be satisfactory. And then some other council departments got to pick up the problem of trying to sort it out. So why is it that local residents fear that there is a problem and there are lack of drains and grates in the area, and yet the council are saying that everything is in the gardens rosy? So that's question number 1. Just what's the logic behind that particular one? I would have thought, well, put it this way, I've sat in enough planning committees that we've always argued that we should be going for top design. We should have top layout, every possible opportunity we get. When we sorted out internally the debates we had about housing numbers, when that was put to bed, it was made very clear that the next item we should be looking at is making sure we get design. So bearing in mind this is a council one, should we not be looking for the council to come up with an exemplar development, one that we should be proud of, and one that we should be using as an exemplar to go around the next time we get 100% affordables, which unusually residents are actually happy for 100% affordable. Nobody's actually arguing against it. So why did we not push to get an exemplar and take the questions that members have raised and say to them, look, we want to be able to use this as the type of affordable housing we're going to get citywide. I don't think we could honestly argue that this is we don't want necessarily all over the place on that one. Right, we've then got consultation. How much consultation have you had with local ward members since all of these changes have and haven't been made, in terms of keeping them up to date, getting involved in discussions with both the local residents, the action groups that are there, and all 3 ward members? And also what have you done about reconsulting when things have changed, whether there has been changes? What have you actually done about that? The other thing is, when it comes to the climate change, should we not be going for exemplar? We're meeting minimum standards. Cannot doubt that we're meeting minimum standards, but should it not be up to the council to put into practice what we on Development Plans Panel have been pushing for, but a ministerial statement kiboshed that one, to be quite frank, by the previous government? Should we not be pushing for that now? That we should be going for exemplar again on the climate change type things. I've been given information, well, I think everybody was sent it, about the suggested realignment of some of the properties, the flats go in a particular place. Why was that not taken forward? So in other words, roughly the same number of houses, but relocating, why was that not looked into? And also there has been comments passed to me as well that there have been new documentation put onto the website recently. The 16th of July was the date that was quoted to me, which has not given anyone any chance publicly to comment, nor has the officer response to that documentation being placed on the website as well, so that we know what's the view of officers to that recently produced information. So if we leave it there for the moment.
Just before I ask the officer to come in, I just want to, because you've raised the point about the council being applicant. We treat all applicants the same. Just because this is an application by another part of the authority does not mean it goes to any other standard or additional querying. Notwithstanding your question, which the officer will come on to, but I think for panel members' considerations, we do not give special treatment or ask special conditionality on the council. It is an applicant like any other applicant. If you'd like to answer the questions.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through them in order. In terms of drainage issues, which you mentioned first, I think we've said at panel before that it's not for an applicant or an application to solve existing problems, and I think we acknowledge there are some issues associated with football parking along this road, and also some problems on drainage as well. Certainly I've seen photographs and videos provided by local residents of water flowing down the street, particularly on days of heavy rainfall. However, it's not for an application, as I say, to solve an existing problem. And we have got technical drawings and support and information submitted by the applicant in the form of detailed drainage calculations, attenuation tanks, etc., which has been run past Yorkshire Water and our colleagues in flood risk management team in some detail. And after a number of revisions, both of those bodies consider the scheme to be acceptable. So it actually caters for its own drainage needs and outputs. In terms of design, I will let Mr. Varley answer questions on design later on, seeing as he's taken time out of his busy diary to attend the planning meeting. In terms of the consultations with ward members, local residents, action groups, residents, etc., that has taken place by the applicant. I mean, there are 2 forms of consultation. There's consultation by an applicant, which is the Housing Growth Team, and there's consultation by the local planning authority. So as far as I'm aware, the applicant has carried out consultation procedures before the application was submitted, and has updated local residents during the course and determination of the current planning application. In terms of the local planning authority, we advertise the application by writing to residents. We put site notices up, we put adverts in the local newspaper, and it's safe to say that the application has been well advertised, evident in the fact that there's been a lot of participation and receipt of representations by the local planning authority from local residents. We do genuinely consult and reconsult when substantial revisions are made to the scheme to allow residents to comment. However, we cannot re-notify and consult residents on every single minute change, because with lots of plan applications, particularly this one, we do get revisions and small bits of information that are submitted continuously. And the onus is on local residents who are fully signed up to the planning portal to make themselves aware of the changes. And in dealing with this plan application, it's evident that local residents are very switched on and are very alive to the receipt of further information that's been submitted on the planning portal. They are very much self-serving their needs to look at that information. So in that respect, we feel that all the information is readily available to the public and for them to be able to comment. In terms of officers considering the changes as well, it's fair to say that we've had a lot of interest from the public, but we've also had a lot of information from the applicant as well. And you asked the question, well, how has that been considered, even at a late stage? I think the answers generally are a lot of hard work by officers and dedication to try and deal with this particular application in a professional manner. And the way we've dealt with these representations and also the information is through the panel report before you, and also as part of my presentation as well today in updating you on what's happened. Next one was about climate change. We had a similar question raised by another panel member last time. I think they wanted to see something over and above what the applicant was doing. I think in that respect, they were looking to encourage the applicant to introduce PV panels onto the roofs, but that wasn't part of the scheme. And I think the answer at the time was, well, actually, what measures have been included in the scheme makes it compliant with our policies EN1 and EN2. So whilst some panel members would certainly desire to be an exemplar scheme, all we can do is determine the application in front of us, and if it is policy compliant, that would be a recommendation in our view of approval. In this respect, it is policy compliant in terms of our climate change policies. Next question was about the realignment of the flats. I think the applicant has considered that, but has considered that the position of the flats as they propose is in a suitable position, and that's a view that officers concur with as well in terms of its angled orientation, its setback nature, and the fact that it would be partially screened by some of the mature trees. So it was considered, but it's not part of a proposal to amend the location. The next one was about documentation on the website and no officer response. I think I've answered that question about looking at it and responding verbally at the panel meeting. In terms of design, we believe this is an acceptable design, policy compliant, that would be fitting within the character of the area given the local context. And if Mr. Varley wants to elaborate on that, feel free to answer if you want to, Steve.
Yeah.
In terms of design.
Sorry, councillor, as you know, I was listening. Can you just, I'm trying to get a handle on what the specific question is about.
I haven't been at either of the two meetings beforehand, so I have received information that made it clear to me that people have raised concerns about the design and layout. Plans panel members, more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, have made comments around the design, the layout, the materials, etc., etc. So I'm just trying to understand why, when elected members and the panel have taken the time to make comments, that's not been reflected back, and then meetings organised with the local ward members to explain why, despite the comments of their colleagues, it's not practical to do it. So I'm just trying to understand the logic, because all the members that have made comments have done it for a reason. Not done it, well, let's fill the time. They've done it for a reason. So I want to know why they did it. I wasn't present, so I can't say whether I agreed or disagreed with any of the comments they've made.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not 100% sure this is a question for Steve at this particular point in time. So I just want to intervene because issues were raised at the positions position statement stage, as you refer to, Councillor Anderson, and similar issues were raised at the last time this was here on the 6th of June for a decision on the lines that you said. As a result of that, officers did go back to the applicant, and let's make a clear distinction of the difference between the applicant and the officers that are trying to lead to a recommendation on the application. Officers, when it was brought the first time, of course, didn't necessarily concur with those comments that were made by the plans panel. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been before members for an approval. The situation is still the same. We think it's appropriate, and Steve can make comments on that because that's a question for him. But I just want to make this clear. So officers did go back. They did request the amendments that you refer to, but the applicant, of course, is not the officers here today, for various reasons, in the main, have decided to justify their position, which includes not reorientating the flats because they think it's appropriate. But I must add that the officers also, we here today, and Adam, think it's appropriate in terms of what they've been presented, because Adam's gone through the bricks, the design. We thought it was appropriate and compliant in policy terms first time. We think it's appropriate and policy compliant this time as the representatives of development management. The applicants didn't agree with the requests that were made by panel. As I say in the report, it's very similar to what was here before. So I hope that answers that question specifically about the quality and the design, the layout and the context. That's certainly Steve's issue. So I hope a thing to comment on. I hope that makes that clear. There was a second part to it as well, wasn't there, I think?
But on the consultation, to the best of my knowledge, no consultation has taken place with elected ward members since the very beginning. There has been none. Now, whether that fell to planning to do it or whether it fell to the applicant to do it, I'm not pointing fingers because I couldn't tell you who's responsible, but I am reliably informed that none of the members nor the residents groups have been consulted since the first time this was brought forward, despite comments being made. Now, normally, when we're on, plans panel make comments, iterations come along. If you're on city plans, applications can go through 4 or 5 iterations before we finally get one that's acceptable to everybody. So on a major development like this, which it is in an area, this size of development, you would expect to keep the elected members informed, doesn't it? I mean, as I know bitterly, doesn't mean to say you've got to agree with the elected members all the time, because, but I've always asked to be kept fully appraised. So that's what I'm trying to find out, because they feel disconnected, and I'm trying to get a connection made so that we can reflect back and say, yes, we have all considered everybody's views, and we've now reached a position. Whether you agree with it or not will come down to the vote at the end of the day. So I accept that, but I just, the ward members and the residents feel that after the first iteration, they have been sidelined.
So is your question, because these questions at the moment, do you feel that their views are valid or not effectively, and what have we done to do that? Is that the question? Is that a question framed in a way that you can answer? Yeah. Yeah.
I understand the question completely, Councillor Anderson, and if I'm teaching suck eggs, I apologise in advance. But there were 2 strands here of consultation, which Adam alluded to. One is what's carried out by the officers here. That is mentioned in detail what was actually done there. And then there is a document called the, I've forgotten the name of it, community. Thank you. Statements of community involvement. It's funny, isn't it? When you're about to say it, it just suddenly disappears. The statements of community involvement, which actually is not compulsory, but it's actually advice and guidance that's provided to applicants to go through the processes that you're talking about. Now, I'm sure that the applicants, if they were here again today, because there's no speakers, would probably contest what you just said, because I seem to recall that when Mark Denton was here, who is the project manager for this particular scheme from Leeds City Council, did make reference to consultation events being carried out. But I also,
Sorry, one second, Steve, 1 second. If you continue to
But I also understand that people obviously disagree with that statement completely. If I'd have been allowed to finish that, the point I'm trying to make here is that the onus to do this is actually reliant upon the applicant themselves. not the officers that are here today. We advertise the application in complete accordance with our own protocols, and the applicant has done what they thought was adequate. Now, whether others might think that is inadequate, again, that is an issue for the applicant, not for us. Thank you.
Are there some follow-ups, Councillor Anderson? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Are there any particular, because obviously there were two parts, there was the consultation and the design question. Are you wanting any comments on the design?
Probably been answered as well. I don't mean that disparagingly. What I mean is, I don't think there'll be anything new will come out by further questioning on the design, because I think that's been quite clear that things have been said, and on balance, the applicants aren't willing to change for whatever reason. And I'm not criticising them for not doing so, but that's my take on the design debate that we're having. So yeah, I'm happy for the.
Any other questions from members before we move to comments? Okay, moving to comments, please. Any comments on the application? Councillor Parnham?
Oh. Thank you, Chair. We seem to be missing a group of people during this discussion, and this is the families that are looking for affordable accommodation, and this development will give 82 families that opportunity. And I understand the concerns of residents. I actually went up, I took myself up and I parked on Huff Top, and I walked around the football field, and from some of the comments we had at the previous plans meeting, I'm new this year, I kind of thought it might be Wembley Stadium or something, but it's just a Sunday football pitch. It's nice leafy lane, but if you carry on up the lane, they're all brick dwellings. There's lots of brick dwellings on both sides. There are some stone properties, but the idea that that stone would trump anything. The other thing is it's a former school site, so I just think it's an excellent use. Where I would love this in my ward. If you want to bring this to my ward, I would be delighted, because we are crying out. It's number one in my inbox, housing, and I just do think that we need to think about the families that this applicant will afford decent housing to. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, next, please.
2 points. One, just on that particular point about affordable housing. Yeah, I think getting this level of affordable housing is great, is excellent. However, I believe that we should be making our affordable housing equal to or better than other housing. So just because someone lives in an affordable house doesn't mean to say that they should have something of lesser value, lesser aesthetics, or anything like that. That we should always be aiming to give these people who are going to a nice house, one that they can enjoy, one that they can be proud of, and one that's warm, keeps their bills at a reasonable limit, etc., and is aesthetically pleasing. So on that one, but my major point is on the consultation. Again, at plans panels in the past, if a developer comes forward and hasn't been consulted, plans panel members normally take that quite seriously and make it very clear to developers, even although you're under no compulsion to consult, it is good practice to do so. And I would argue that on this occasion, the applicants should have used best practice and should have consulted more widely and should have brought along residents and elected members with them, so that we can get the support. Because as Councillor Parnham says, as a local ward member, you should be welcoming affordable housing in your community. But by the mere fact that they're not, and they're not arguing against the principle of affordable housing, it's the design and the layout that they're actually arguing against. So I think we should have done something like that. And as such, I don't think I can support the application as it is, because I don't think it's good enough.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo really what Councillor Parnham said, because I also represent in a city ward, and we really are struggling for housing to house everyone that needs somewhere affordable to live. There's an affordability crisis going on in housing. Yeah, so I'm actually quite disappointed that this is dragged on for so long, because it's so difficult to get these applications put together in the first place. Yeah, so I mean, I can understand where in some ways the locals are coming from in terms of their concerns, but I do note that in the report it states that some issues around antisocial behaviour and things like this have been already addressed and amended, like with the play area has been reduced, which, I mean, if it was my ward, I'd want a bigger one, but the ward members know their area best. So like, to me, on balance, it seems that everything is in order for this application. And a lot of thought and effort has been put in by the applicants and the objectors and the ward members. So I think at this point, I'd just be happy to move the recommendations, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Firth.
My concern with comments from Councillor Parnham and Councillor Brooks is that there's been a big emphasis on other wards and other areas. The nature of it is we take an application as it is in the area that it sits and whether it's appropriate for it to be developed in that area, regardless of whether we want it elsewhere in our ward or elsewhere in the city. In this particular case, it has also been mentioned that there's been particular effort made to engage with the public and that the ward members have been on board. But we've had it clearly to us that the ward members haven't been engaged from the first stage. And there is, regardless of whether, we don't know whether they're exactly correct, but there has been evidence provided that also, Councillor Parnham, you've raised concerns that in the past, when you were at the 6th of June, that points that had been raised earlier had not been dealt with since then. So the concern is, and I feel that I can't support this application further if what was being addressed right back at the beginning and that this panel with previous members has raised concerns and they've still not been addressed.
Thank you, Chair. I guess this is quite a contested application. We've looked at the bricks, and we've looked at almost everything really since I think the day that I sat on this panel. And I guess I'm one of those councillors that did say that because the bricks and has not been addressed, it would be nice for for us to go back and address that. And because of that interest as well into this, I've really I've read it and highlighted, and I find a lot of things have been addressed. I guess I think to myself whether because obviously they've now gone back and said there are other houses that are of the the red brick. They've addressed the issue of the one way in and one way out street. They've addressed the height of the barriers and all that. They've addressed all that. A few comments from Councillor Firth and everybody else in terms of consultation. I guess or possibly I wonder whether if we keep on moving it back and forth and all that, Sports England is going to address whatever that needs to be. Is it helping in terms of us now balancing the fact that we've got so many people maybe, needing housing? The fact that maybe there might not be a change in terms of the brick layout because there are other houses around that have got that. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that, and I guess we'll see today, how this goes. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? Councillor Roundtree?
Thank you, Chair. At this stage, I don't myself think there are grounds for opposing the recommendation that officers have made here. Thinking back to when this first came before us, and we were invited to comment on the application early stage, there's myself and others made observations. I mean, my take on it was, I think, along the lines of, well, I wonder if we could persuade them to try a bit harder and do a bit better. And making comments on the design at that stage. I know some of my colleagues mentioned the prospect of stone facings. I didn't myself, but I think it's clear that there's been quite a lot said about this. I think it's clear from the documentation that the cost is a serious factor here, and so it's. In many ways, I do agree with Councillor Anderson when he says that we ought to, if we can, to make our design standards for social housing to be the gold standard, so that we can put it in front of future developers and say, look, this is how you do, how you can do social housing. I think we've run into an economic reality here, and I mean the message that has come back from the applicant is one of affordability, and that no, we can't go any further, and I don't think there's much arguing with that. In terms of actual planning, as I say, the decision before us, my feeling at this stage is that the case has been made, and I tend to support the application for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roundtree, and apologies if I keep calling you Roundtree for some reason. I think I want some pastels. Councillor Anderson?
Is there anything that we can do at this stage to try and give reassurance to local residents and local ward members about how the various costs that are going to have to be incurred for ongoing maintenance and repair of these sites? Because my understanding is that there is no SIL money applicable here, so there is no fund that that local ward members can use in order to fund various things. Is there anything that can be done at this late stage? Because again, this would have come out in the consultation, that's questions and queries from local people. Is there anything we can do, or is it too late in the cycle now?
Just bear in mind, we're at the conversation for other questions today. I'm just going to have a kind of look from the officer without going into detail. Is that something we can look to get sorted? Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to put my colleagues who are not here into a difficult spot, but I understand the messages that are being made about the consultation issues completely. And I'm just saying to Jonathan there, I think it's appropriate that we will take the message back to housing growth. That there need to be, as if this application should be approved, that they need to be more involved in the progress of this application through its development. I don't know if that would help, Councillor Anderson.
Any other comments? Now, I am aware that Councillor Anderson. Oh, does someone else wanted to give a comment? No.
No, Chair, I was going to remind you that someone has moved the recommendation.
So do we need? Oh yeah. So we'll do the. I believe you put forward an alternative motion. Is there a seconder for that? Okay, we have a proposing second. Can you just confirm what that motion is before we put it to the vote, please?
Sorry.
Nikki.
Clarity. That was an amendment to the motion that's on the table that Councillor Brooke has moved to approve the application. You were seeking to amend that same motion on the basis of further discussions occur with the applicant.
And with local ward members. And effectively what I'm saying, I'll put it in basic terms. If they can't get agreement and they've been consulted, then I think we have to then approve it. If you see what I know, I'm putting it in as basic terms as possible, that they need to be consulted. There needs to be discussions going on to try and change the tweaking at the edges of it. I'm not saying I'm against the development per se, you see, because I don't want to lose I do not want to lose the affordable housing. I want to keep the affordable housing, but I just want a better development. That's all I'm arguing for. say defer for one cycle, but I just want it deferred so that further discussions can take place with ward members and local residents. Try and get them on
That's a
side.
different motion. That, Councillor Anderson, is a competing motion because you're asking for a deferral for the matter to return. Is that correct? I'm just trying to clarify the motion that you put forward, because we've got a motion on the table to approve, as per the amendments that Adam Ward has suggested at the beginning of the presentation. What you're suggesting is a deferral for further consultation to occur with the applicant in relation to the application. Right. I'm going to refer to Steve so that this can be clarified further.
I'd taken a slightly different take on it to Nikki, although she's right in what she's suggesting there. But I thought we were talking about introducing, in effect, what we would do with a private developer, in essence, a liaison committee with the community whilst the development has been constructed, so that any issues can be ironed out on site. Is that what was being suggested? Because, sorry, just brief me, because we just need to be very clear on this, Councillor Anderson, in which case that is just an amendment to the motion that Councillor Brooke made, which was to move for the application to be approved in principle but deferred and delegated to the Chief Planning Officer subject to no objections from Sport England, in which case that's great, and it would then be incumbent to somebody to second that. But if I've got that wrong and Nikki is correct, then it is a completely different motion, and Nikki might want to give advice, bearing in mind we already have a motion put forward, whether we should be voting on that first or not.
Right. The comment that Steve has just made, is that acceptable to you, Councillor Anderson, as an amendment to the existing motion?
But, yes, that would, I mean, maybe I have a different nuance on some of it, but in broad terms, yes.
Okay, so I want to be absolutely clear that you are amending the motion that Councillor Brooks has put on the table in order for a liaison committee arrangement to be created, even if there is approval for this application, subject to Sports England approving the plans that have been put forward. We're waiting for that period to end, and that consultation committee and that ongoing liaison between the applicant and ward members and the community continue after the application is approved. And we've got numerous examples of this throughout the city happening.
Yeah, in terms, yes. So in other words, use the downtime that we're going to get while Sports England make their decision and utilise that time to speak to the local ward members and to speak to local residents. Use that time productively. That's what I'm arguing.
That is completely different, because that could result in a change to the application. I want to be absolutely certain that members are voting on the right motion, and you're absolutely satisfied with a community liaison arrangement being voted on. Otherwise, that is a competing, what you're proposing is a competing motion. So if you could clarify for the purpose of this plans panel so that members are aware of what they're voting for.
Sorry, it's often me to try and clarify these things, because I think I understand what Councillor Anderson's doing, but Nikki's completely right. That if you're expecting the time between now and whenever Sport England come back for the applicant to continue to negotiate and discuss the detail of this application, that is utterly different to a motion that's been moved by Councillor Brooks. Councillor Brooks, of course, is supporting the substantive motion, accepting, of course, the reference to Sport England. So I hope that's clear. The thing that I was suggesting was just the ongoing liaison committee to try and actually bridge some of the issues that have been created by the sounds of it in terms of what's the perceived lack of consultation. So it is post decision. So it's a completely different kettle of fish, because to do what you're asking to do, Councillor Anderson, I think, is that the application will be a separate motion is put forward by yourself to defer this for, in essence, further negotiation with the applicant on certain issues. That's why I suggested the liaison committee, because I think the issue here is to build some of the bridges, isn't it? And Councillor Brooks's motion is different in that respect. I hope that's clear.
I mean, I'm no lawyer, so I'm not the expert at wording these things. So in essence, I prefer to go with the latter option, which is to enable more conversation to take place. So then I was trying to do it so that we would have just the motion itself with an amendment to it that we could live with, because other members have said that they are sympathetic to some of the points that have been made. So I was trying my best to meet the needs of let's approve it, but at the same time to reflect back, not just my comments, other people have reflected back that they are minded to have a degree of sympathy. And I was just trying my best. But look, if someone can, I'm not a wordsmith.
So just to confirm, I think for everyone, because basically your amendment would approve the application in principle, but subject to the creation of an ongoing liaison between the applicant and the local residents. Or are you proposing that it's not approved in principle, subject to further consultation? I think that's the two differences.
In principle is that we agree that we need affordable housing in the area and that we are happy to have affordable housing. As a panel, I think we've got unanimity that we are saying that in my words, we are happy to have full 100% affordable housing on site here, but there are some of the details beneath that need to be ironed out beforehand. That's what I'm trying to do, is to give a chance for some of those things, because I don't think, in my opinion, the applicants have consulted enough. I'm not pointing the finger at planning here. I'm saying, so that's what I'm trying to clumsily find a way of approving the principle of affordable housing, which I don't think there's any dissension on at all, but to tweak it slightly, to add a bit of colour, to give the residents and local ward members an opportunity to try and one last time to mould it to a satisfactory way forward.
Chair, sorry to prolong this, but Chair, that is quite simply a competing motion, and it's not within the remit of the panel to actually cobble together what's been suggested there. So what we have is we either have the situation where the principle is agreed as put forward by Councillor Brooke, but with the potential additional element, which is the creation of a liaison committee between the applicants and the residents to hopefully build some of those bridges as we go forward. Or alternatively, a motion is put forward for this to be deferred for further discussions on certain elements. Now, those certain elements would then now have to be identified if that is a competing motion. But I'm just going to go back to Nikki for one little bit of advice. Bearing in mind a motion's already been moved but not seconded, which do we take first?
Okay, I think it's incumbent on Councillor Anderson to clarify that he concurs with the summary that's been provided by Steve, and which option he's supporting. Yeah, I just want to be absolutely clear, because I don't want a situation arising where members vote on something and the reality is it's something else that was considered. So is it an amendment, Councillor Anderson, in relation to option A, as Steve has set out? Yeah. Or option two, which is a deferral in order for consultation to take place and the matters to return if those consultation matters do not resolve themselves.
Go for option two in that case, as far as I'm concerned. And it's been seconded, so. Yeah. So.
So your competing motion is to defer the application.
As a result of been able to come up with a compromise position, then I have to go for that one. I've been forced into that position because compromise on the other ones isn't possible. So I accept the advice of what Mr. Butler has said. And so the question I was asked by Councillor Brooks was, am I going for option A or option B? I was going for what I term option B, which is the deferral, for want of a better way of describing it.
Okay, so we've got two motions on the table. Neither have been seconded. Oh, sorry, Councillor Firth has seconded. So that goes first. That's better.
So just to clarify, this is a motion to defer and bring back to panel after subsequent negotiation. That is the alternate motion at the moment.
Can we just confirm that Councillor Anderson is happy with that?
Yes.
Okay.
On that basis, I will move to the vote. This has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour of the amended motion as put forward by Councillor Anderson? All those against the motion?
2, 3, 4, 6, 7.
And for completeness, any abstentions?
No.
So moving back to the original motion, we have had a proposer. I would require a seconder. There's always a fight for this, Councillor Francis Mear. So we have had a proposer and a seconder for the motion with subject to the additional conditionality raised during the meeting. Just before members vote on this, do you want to just quickly sum up where we are, Steve, just for clarity, because we've had quite a lot of conversations, and then we'll go to the proposed motion in the papers.
Well, as the original motion as put forward by Councillor Brooke referred to the application to be approved in principle, but delegated to the Chief Planning Officer subject to no adverse comments from Sport England. That's what is before you and does not include the setting up of the liaison committee.
Are members clear what they're voting on before I ask them to vote? So all those in favour of that, please. All those against? And any abstentions for completeness? Okay, thank you very much for that, colleagues. Officers, confirm the vote, please, Jess.
Yeah, sorry, just to summarise. Just to summarise then, that the application has been approved in principle, subject to it being deferred and delegated to the Chief Planning Officer, awaiting the outcome of the Sport England consultation response. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So thank you very much for with respect, sir, please, I've got a meeting to conduct. Agenda item number 9, date and time of the next meeting. This is proposed to be Thursday, the 5th September 2024 at 1:30 p.m. That concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you for your attendance and contributions. I now declare the meeting closed. If we can turn off the live feed, please.